Hi, I'm Stella, and this is my podcast, Living on the Edge of Art. I'm reading through the Bible this year and podcasting about the ways that those of us living on the edge can read scripture in difficult times. I say that I'm podcasting through the Bible, but really what I'm doing is just marinating in the Bible. I love getting to do the podcast, but the thing about the podcast is it slows me down. It takes a little while to put together, so I can read faster than I can podcast. So even though, as I mentioned a few weeks ago, I finished the Old Testament, I haven't finished podcasting. And so it forces me to slow down and sit. And so right now I'm sitting again with Daniel, and I want to walk through this with you. Daniel is a book with exciting stories. Daniel in the lion's den. He's thrown into the lion's den and God shuts the lion's mouths and they don't eat him. And the story of the three friends whose names are so fun to say, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who are thrown into a fire and they're not burned. And so there's all of these exciting stories. But for those of us living on the edge, the message underneath them all, the question is, how do you live when the ground just keeps shifting underneath you? So we're going to talk about that today on the podcast. So one fact about the book of Daniel is it's written in two languages, in Hebrew and Aramaic. Some of the chapters are written in Aramaic. So Hebrew was the language of the Jews, the language of the Old Testament, but Aramaic arose later. It was the language that the people spoke when they were ruled over by other empires. It's the language that Jesus spoke. And so this little known fact isn't just a little known fact that I'm saying to act like I know a lot. It's important because it shows that there's this shift in culture, that they're being ruled over by other people, that the ground is shifting beneath their feet. In the book of Daniel, Daniel and his friends are exiles living in Babylon, and so they are given new names. They are given Babylonian names. Daniel is called Belshazzar. His friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are called Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Or actually, the other way around. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah are their Hebrew names, and their Babylonian names are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Imagine that. Imagine being subjugated to the point that you don't get to speak your own language and you don't even get your own name. How do you live like that? How do you live in a place that is changing like that, where you can't even call yourself by your own name? I think about living on the edge, going through change and feeling like the culture is changing so much. And in so many ways, there are forbidden words or politically correct terms that in some ways culture presses on us so much that we can't even speak our language. I know one of the debates that I've had over the years in the church is the idea that we shouldn't use churchy language. We shouldn't call the narthex, or what's called the chancel or the altar area is a stage. And part of me wants to push back and say there's meaning behind words, and I don't want to let go of them. And so we see Daniel getting torn into this place of how to be faithful. And so one of the ways that he's faithful is he just keeps on going, and he finds favor with God. He's able to interpret dreams. He hangs on through the hard times, and he pushes back on the idea that culture has won. And when I see Daniel do they're given food rations, rich and good food, and Daniel refuses it and just eats vegetables. He stands out. And I was thinking about the very first time I got to vote as a clergy person in the United Methodist Church. It must have been 2010, I guess, 2011, somewhere in there. And the first session that I got to vote we were considering the ordination path of a woman who was, I guess, gay in a relationship. She eventually became transgender. And I didn't know her personally, but a lot of people I knew did. And they spoke highly of her. And the vote was really, really close. And finally, they said we had to stand to vote. And I remember wanting to be nice, wanting to be kind to this person, but just realizing that a woman can't become a man. And I didn't want to speak a language that wasn't true to me. And I had to stand up. And all of a sudden, I couldn't be in hiding anymore. My friends who didn't know that this was the way I believed had all voted differently. And as I looked around the room to see who else was standing with me, I was one of the few that didn't have gray hair. And I remember thinking, things are shifting, things are changing. And I felt like all eyes were on me, and it was scary. Am I doing the wrong thing? But I knew that I couldn't do any other. I had to use my vote for what I believed was right. And so when I see Daniel and I see the cost that he had to pay, the split in the Methodist Church was long and slow, but it cost me a lot, and it cost me friends, and it cost me my whole community. But for Daniel, it almost cost him his life. But how can we do otherwise? And so sometimes we get pushed to the edge, and we have to take our stand. And so we find inspiration in Daniel, and I want to read some of that to you. So in the book of Daniel, Daniel interprets the king's dream, and the king is so grateful that he promotes Daniel. He gives him gifts. He makes him ruler of the whole province of Babylon. And then Daniel makes a request of the king, and he appoints Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained in the king's court. And so chapter 3 of the book of Daniel, King Nebuchadnezzar made a golden statue whose height was 60 cubits and whose width was 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then King Nebuchadnezzar sent for the satraps, the prefects and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to assemble and come to the dedication of the great statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of all the provinces assembled for the dedication of the statue. When they were standing before the statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, the herald proclaimed aloud, "You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, and entire musical ensemble, you're to fall down and worship the golden statue. Whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be thrown into the furnace of blazing fire." Therefore, as soon as all the people heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, and entire musical ensemble, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the golden statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Accordingly, at this time, certain Chaldeans came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, and entire musical ensemble shall fall down and worship the golden statue. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These pay no heed to you, O king. They do not serve your gods, and they do not worship the golden statue." Then Nebuchadnezzar, in a furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought in so that those men could come before the king. He said to them, "Is it true that you do not serve my gods and you do not worship the golden statue? Now, if you are ready, when you hear the sounds of the musical instruments, to worship the statue I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire. And who is the God that will deliver you out of my hands?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to present a defense to you in this matter. If our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire and out of your hand, O king, let him deliver us. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods. We will not worship the golden statue that you set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar was so filled with rage against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that his face was distorted. He ordered the furnace heated up 7 times more than was customary, and ordered some of the strongest guards in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the furnace of blazing fire. So the men were bound, still wearing their tunics, their trousers, their hats, and their other garments, and they were thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. Because the king's command was urgent, and the furnace was so overheated, the raging flames killed the men who lifted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound into the furnace of blazing fire. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up quickly. He said to his counselors, "Was it not 3 men that we threw bound into the fire?" They answered the king, "True, O king." He replied, "But I see 4 men, unbound, walking in the middle of the fire, and they're not hurt. And the 4th has the appearance of a god." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the door of the furnace of blazing fire and said, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So they came out of the fire. And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not any power over the bodies of these men. The hair on their heads was not singed, their tunics were not harmed, not even the smell of fire came from them. I love that story of the 3 men and the 4th man that we interpret as Jesus himself walking in the fire with them. This is a story that we often tell to children, often tell at Vacation Bible School, because it is just so dramatic. But it's good to go back and remember it and read it, and just read that big story of the men who refused to bow down, refused to compromise, and God saved them. I'm hanging on to the story and hanging on to faith as I'm a little distracted today by a young woman who is needing my help and is in a lot of pain. The last couple of nights I've gone to bed just trusting that she's going to be okay and worrying about her and realizing that there's not a whole lot more I can do for her, and wondering how much I should do, and just seeing real pain in a real dire situation. And I want her to know the God that I know, and I want her to have the faith that allows you to walk through fire. But at a certain point, you just have to trust that God will work, that God will save a person who so badly needs saving, spiritually, financially, emotionally, all of it. And I'm praying for the discernment to know what to do in the middle of it. But I know we have a God who saves, and I know that sometimes we get pushed to the edge of ourselves, and we live on that edge. We don't always live in safety. We don't always live in comfort. We don't always live in freedom. Sometimes we get pushed to bow down to idols, to tell lies, to do things that are really difficult in all kinds of ways. But God is good, and God saves. And we need to hold on to that truth every day. I'm feeling kind of energized because I got to preach this past week. I got to preach in Mason. The last time I preached there, I was applying for a job there over a year ago. So it was a little awkward and different. And yet when I got to get up and just share the word of the Lord, it is an amazing, wonderful thing. And so I'm just putting one foot in front of the other, and I'm just going to keep doing it and see what happens next. tomorrow I get to leave. Let's see, tomorrow will be Tuesday for me. I get to leave for a vacation to go up to Seattle where it's cool and beautiful and see Emory. Really looking forward to this coming week with my family. And I will be back with another podcast. I will talk to you about the minor prophets, the 12 prophetic books that come at the end of the New Testament. They're all pretty short. And then it's into the New Testament. And the journey continues. And so I want to encourage you to pick up the book of Daniel. Read the story of the fiery furnace. Read the story of Daniel in the lion's den. And read a little of the context. Read the story of the faith of a man who had to live in a strange land, who held on to his faith, and the bigger picture of the Hebrew people that were able to stay a people despite all of this. God gets us through. God bless you this week.